My name's Don McVey and this is a test of all the LEE Filters Diffusions done with Kieron Jansch from Manned Camera on his lovely Arri Amira. So we used an Arri M8, which is a lovely little 800 watt HMI. I'm sure you've probably used 216, it's a diffusion I've used a lot in the past, very, very soft. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this test in the first place was because I've probably been overusing 216. I think maybe a lot of people have, and it's such a popular diffusion, it goes out on shoots just about all the time. And I'd have used other diffusions in the past, but really, to be honest, not that many. So what I wanted to do was to go through the whole LEE Filters range and just get a chance to see what every single diffusion is doing. That's the real point of this test. And just really give the tools to be able to make informed decisions about what diffusion you're going to use. As we sort of step down these white diffusions, you start to see that this diffusion gets very, very subtle, but you're still able to see that it's doing something very nice. So by the time you get down to like a quarter white diffusion, then the next one's an eighth white diffusion, you're kind of doing really subtle things now comparing it to the naked M8, but there is definitely things happening. When you side by side these, you get a chance to say, okay, that's doing just a little bit, it's just knocking a bit off the edge of the shadow, and that's really what I wanted to find out. So 400 is another very strong, soft diffusion. Is it very similar to 216? Yes, to my eye it looks extremely similar to 216, but side by side in it you will see there are subtle differences. I actually used Hollywood Frost on a job very recently where I was doing like a usual suspects type lineup with 6 subjects. We didn't want to take out too much light, we didn't want any fall off across the subjects, so I just wanted to take the edge off the shadow, and Hollywood Frost worked absolutely beautifully, and I wouldn't have known that it was going to work, and I wouldn't have the confidence in it if I hadn't actually done this test. And so being able to do this test and then look at it, I went, this is going to work, I think it's going to work anyway, and then we put it up and it worked absolutely perfectly, and it really showed me the power of doing these tests. I was also able to show the director this video, and she looked at it, and we went through about 8 or 9 different diffusions so we could choose the one that would best match the look of what she was going for. And at that moment I realised just how great it was to have this on set. So what we find with some of these frosts is they're not really changing the detail of the shadow or the shape of the shadow, but they are softening out some hot spots on the skin. Sometimes you don't think the frosts are doing much, but they're doing little things like evening out skin tones, changing the quality of the light across the skin ever so slightly, and you really have to side by side it to see what it's doing. Just a quick word about how we went about these tests. We wanted to keep it as scientific as possible, so we were using a light meter to measure the amount of light taken out by each diffusion. We found that by flagging off the light completely and not allowing any spill round the side, we actually got very, very dark shadows, and it was quite distracting to look at. So what we did was we just allowed a little bit of light to spill onto the floor, which was white, and it bounced back up into our model's face, and it did a lovely job of just filling in the shadows just a little bit. So the t-stop values are what we were measuring on the day and what these filters were taking out, but you've got to take into account a little bit of spill. If you really want to know exactly how much light a diffusion is going to take out, I suggest you go to the LEE Filters website. And again, a heavy frost is very similar to 216 or 400, but you will find if you side by side them that there's a slightly different tone to the skin and a slightly different quality of light. Straight away to my eye, the heavy quiet frost is just warming the skin tones ever so slightly, so you're getting a very similar soft effect in the shadows as some of the other diffusions but you're maybe just changing the colour tone ever so slightly, and that's really good to know when you're going through these filters, which one are you going to use and which one's going to affect your colour of your image and not just the softness of the shadows. So any difference you're seeing in colour across these tests is completely down to the diffusions. We never graded this image at all, we just put on a standard Amira LUT. Right away you can see that half soft frost has cooled it down a little bit. Half soft frost is a favourite of Shane Hurlbut's, and if you're not on the inner circle, get on there today, it's a fantastic resource. I remember when I put up highlight straight away I thought I like this. I don't know why, but there was something very nice about it. Now I've not used grid cloth much in the past, but straight away when I was putting it up I thought this is doing something really nice to skin tones. It maybe adds just a tiny hint of yellow. And the grid cloths are a fantastic material to work with. They're kind of the same stuff you make kites from, so you can stretch them out, you can tie them to things, you can put them in frames. They're really strong and tough. They don't make a lot of noise when in the wind, they don't flap about, so it's a fantastic material. And I actually ended up using the quarter grid cloth on a shoot very recently because the director looked at it. We wanted to keep a bit of detail in the shadows and it was just absolutely perfect. I'm not sure if the quiet grid cloths actually do anything different to the image than the regular grid cloths, but they're there to help the sound man so you don't get as much rustle in the wind. Now I can confirm that I gave the quiet grid cloths a little rustle and they are quiet. I found the tough spuns to be quite similar to the white diffusions, but they maybe just hold a little bit more detail in the shadows. So again, we've got these very subtle diffusion effects. The quarter spun is just taking edges of shadows, so maybe this is exactly what you need for a specific job. And you can see that the flame retardant spuns say that they're non-yellowing, and I don't know if that means that the tough spuns before were actually giving a little bit of yellow to the skin. Again, you'd really have to side by side it to see the difference. I am going to be putting up screen grabs from all this on my website with two galleries side by side, so you can cycle through each diffusion and really see for yourself the side by side comparisons. So the perforated diffusions are actually supposed to really be used with Kino flows, but we thought we'd just put the M8 through it anyway and see what happened. Perforated diffusions have little holes in them, so the soft light from the Kino can penetrate through easier, but it still takes the edge off that type of light. We also used an Arri tungsten T2, which had very similar photometrics to the M8. We used a tungsten source firstly so we could test the daylight corrected diffusions, but we also wanted to see the difference between tungsten and daylight when it came to the coloured diffusions. So this is just 1/8 CTB added to this diffusion, which just cools the image down ever so slightly from the tungsten source. So we've got a full CTB correction, we've got the camera at 5600 and a tungsten light, and to my eye this image is definitely going to need some colour correction. But I wanted to show you what it looked like straight out the camera with that daylight corrected diffusion on there. So here's another fully daylight corrected diffusion, and again we have slightly different colour hues. You'll see that now we've flagged off the light completely and it's all got very contrasty. That's because we're using a tungsten source and we have daylight corrected diffusions, so we really didn't want any spill to interfere with the colour on this, so what you're seeing is what the diffusion does to a tungsten light. So with these, because it was half CTB, what we did was we shot it at 3200 and 5600 just to show you the difference. So here's another one with an 8th CTB, which is just going to cool down a tungsten source ever so slightly. Again, full CTB on here. It's taken out a lot of light because you've got the diffusion plus the colour, and to my eye that's a little bit pink. So this is a neutral density diffusion. You could maybe use that when you've got sunlight coming through a window, so you're taking out light and you're diffusing your image. So these are the colour effect diffusions. So what we did with these is we tested them with the M8 and the T2 just to really show you the difference between putting an HMI through and a tungsten source. I really like this Moroccan frost. It just does something very nice to skin tones and it just kind of gives you a sort of evening hour kind of glow. So the Hampshire Rose is designed specifically to enhance skin tones. So here again we've got the M8 and the T2, so you can see which one you prefer, which one gives you a nicer skin tone, your tungsten or your daylight. Maybe it's not a question of nicer, but more about what the look you're going for. These amber keys I found really nice as well if you're wanting to just warm everything up a little bit. Now would I use a combined colour effect gel and diffusion in one? I'm not so sure. I'd maybe go with using separate diffusion and then putting in a colour effect over the light, but I can certainly see the advantage in some situations in having it all in one roll of diffusion. So I really hope you've got something out of these tests. I really hope they've been useful. I certainly learned a huge amount making them, and I'm going to be using a lot more diffusions across my work from now on. Thank you.